Hitch up the wagons and polish your spurs because it's high noon and the searchers are looking for a way into your network. October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and Infosec is helping to tame the wild, wild net with our collection of free training resources that will make your employees the masters of the cyber frontier and bring cybersecurity to the forefront of your organization. Go to infosecinstitute.com/NCSAM2020 to download our free toolkit containing a stagecoach full of provisions to run month-long security awareness campaign, including posters, infographics, newsletters, email templates, presentations, and more. Grab Cybersecurity Awareness Month by the horns with this wild bunch of free material from our award-winning LX Labs team. Just as the wanted posters in the Wild West help the public recognize the region's most notorious villains, our free training kit reveals the identities of common cyber threats to help prepare your employees for the real attacks they face. Again, go to infosecinstitute.com/NCSAM2020 or click the link in the description to get your free collection of training materials and help spread security awareness. And now, let's begin the show, partner. Welcome to this week's episode of the Cyberwork with Infosec podcast. Each week, I sit down with a different industry thought leader, and we discuss the latest cybersecurity trends, how those trends are affecting the work of Infosec professionals, while offering tips for those trying to break in or move up the ladder in the cybersecurity industry. The story of my guests today is, as they say, ripped straight from the headlines. Gary DeMercurio and Justin Wynn, both of the company Coalfire, were arrested at the Dallas County Courthouse in Iowa while doing red team pen testing for the state of Iowa's judicial branch. The story's fascinating, and I'm going to let them tell you all about it. But for cybersecurity professionals and red teamers in particular, it's a nightmare scenario. And like many of these wrong place, wrong time situations, there's a chance that it could have gone a different way if law enforcement had been a bit more understanding to the nature of what needs to be done to ensure a strong security profile. So I'm going to talk to our guests, not just about the story and all its details, but I'd like to see if we can get a sense of some of the legal gray areas currently around red team operations, futures of such activities, and the ways that it can be made more safe without reducing effectiveness. Gary DeMercurio runs one of the largest groups in Coalfire Labs as a senior manager working with technologies every day. His expertise focuses on social engineering, physical testing, and network devices. At Coalfire, Gary manages day-to-day business involved with FedRAMP, PCI, HIPPA, and penetration testing, while helping to spearhead the physical and social engineering portion of testing. As a senior security consultant, Justin Wynn is responsible for actively compromising and reporting on virtual environments typically encountered at Fortune 500 companies. Justin performs wireless, physical, red team, and social engineering engagements. Justin also conducts research to include production of open source models for printing, milling to aid in red team engagements, as well as specific regard to tool gaps in the locksport industry, as well as master keys for access control and elevator overrides. Currently, Justin is researching security vulnerabilities in various RFID devices. Gary and Justin, thanks for joining us today on Cyberwork.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Cool. So I want to start with your background. We got a little bio there, but how long have you both been in the security industry, and how long have you been red teamers specifically, and what was your path to that type of work?
All right, let me go first because Gary has an amazing background, so he always stumps me if I'm not first. So been in the industry for about 5 years, broke in from scratch. I was a marketing major coming out of college and then trying to realign what I wanted to do with my life. I really liked urban exploring, everything to do with physical security, military type stuff. And I wanted to see how I could make this work in the civilian career style. So ended up figuring out a lot of this is all virtual work. That's where a lot of the money comes from, PCI and HIPAA. That's how we keep our jobs most of the time. And then on top of that, if you can get in a physical security position, really coveted, very difficult. But the way to break into the industry was virtual. So started getting my certifications, studied on my own while I had some other jobs, and eventually just started sending out applications. And Coalfire was kind enough to give me a chance.
Cool. How about you, Gary?
In my former life, I was a helicopter pilot for the United States Marine Corps. And
Wow.
We have, I don't know if you know much about Marines, but we have about 50 jobs each.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those jobs was building and maintenance. And for the building and maintenance, I was also responsible for the zipper vault that we have in the squadron. So at some point, my OIC came to me and said, "Hey, you think you can break into this?" And I said, "Well, sir, I built it. I know exactly how to break into it." So I broke into it. I was successful. And from there, I kind of was asked to do another and another and another. So that's kind of the genesis of my breaking and entering for my life. And then I got out and I became an engineer and did something else in another life. And then that started to get really boring and really easy. And I thought to myself, I was like, I wonder if I could break into stuff for a living. And so I started doing some research, and lo and behold, that's when I found red teaming. And
Yeah.
I said, well, how hard could that be? And so I went
Right.
out and got a master's degree in all things computers, and Coalfire gave me a shot, not having a whole lot of experience, at least in consulting and things of that nature. And then the rest, as they say, is history.
So it sounds like, Justin, you mentioned specifically interest in physical security. Do you guys each have sort of like a subspecialty within red teaming? Like, you're the physical security guy and you're the computer security guy, or do you sort of, do you guys work as a team all the time? And
when we can, it's definitely preferable. We have just good team dynamics. It's really strange every time you go out on a red team. Your partner is very important, and how you guys flow with everything. So a lot of times, like once you work with somebody like Gary, it almost becomes nonverbal. So you just kind of nudge them. They know they're going one way, you're going the other, and you're working towards the same objective. And of course, definitely have different skill sets, different things that we focused on in the past. So I'm pretty heavy into the virtual stuff, networking, RFID, and Gary's great in all those too. And Gary's a great lock picker, excellent physical bypasses and social engineering. So yeah, we just kind of bounce off each other in that role.
Nice. So, I know you've been on, the promotional tour, and you've recounted this a million times, but if you don't mind, could you walk us through the event yourself? If you don't mind, could you reconstruct the work you were doing at the courthouse the moment you tripped the alarm to the authorities and the response when they arrived?
You want to take it, G?
I suppose. So let's see. If we're just going over that portion of it, we actually arrived at, I don't know, 11:30-ish, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
We kind of did a walk around of the building. When I say walk around, typically when you go to a building and you haven't been there before, you walk around and you check the whole thing out. Our walk around was we parked in the back and walked to the front. When we got there, the sheriff's department was actually right across the street from the courthouse, so it wasn't like a surprise that we knew that the police were close by.
Right.
We walked up and Justin was trying the door at the same time. I was trying a badge that we had taken from another building just to see if they had multi-building access. And so I was beep, and then Justin opened the door. I'm like, did it work? And he was like, no, it was just open. I was like, oh, okay. So Justin shut the door, and then we proceeded to bypass the door just to give them the benefit of the doubt. In this, I don't say in this scenario, but in this engagement, overall, there was an overlying theme, which was really easy access to everything. And so this was another one of those times where we just kind of shook our heads and said, okay, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. What would happen if there wasn't a mistake, or what would happen if somebody didn't leave a door wide open somewhere else? Which again was a recurring theme. So we shut the door and then just went from there.
Was it just that the door had like not closed all the way or something like that?
Yep, that was it. Old door, right?
Yeah.
Old door, super old courthouse.
Right.
They literally still have the original latch on the doors from 100 years ago, probably.
Okay.
They've there's my dog.
Hey.
On cue. They've upgraded
three
things.
Guests on the show today.
Yeah, they've upgraded things. In putting a crash bar on the back of the door itself, but the actual old school locking mechanism of the door is still there.
Okay.
And I think that's actually what interfered was the old locking mechanism of the old door handle that was there, and then the latch wasn't able to latch. If I remember right, I don't know, I could be wrong, but
so you heard the alarm going off, and you're like, okay, we're just gonna wait until they get here, and we're gonna explain ourselves, and then they arrived and they didn't want to hear an explanation.
Kind of. Actually, there's a little bit more to it than that. As soon as we went to the door, there's an alarm panel around the side, and part of what we do is to make sure that people aren't using default codes. Right. Because a lot of people set up their alarm and they never change their
1, 2, 3, 4 or something. Yeah.
Right, and it's always the same depending on what company you're using, what company's installed the alarm panel. So that's the first thing we did was try and make sure they're not using default codes. Usually have 20 to 30 seconds depending on the alarm system to punch in said code. After we did that, after we went through the codes that I could remember, we actually set the alarm off ourselves. I just kept hitting the same number over and over and over again to see if it had a lockout on it. And probably the third code I tried, or I should say the third entry of the bunk code I knew wasn't going to work, actually set it off. So it went off about 10 seconds early. So as soon as the alarm actually went off in earnest and started blaring, I turned to Justin. Justin was actually there for kind of I don't want to say a training regiment because the guy is brilliant, but it was like the next step in the evolution is he was supposed to take over the physical aspect of testing at Coalfire. And so part of being the lead of that is to teach others. And so that is basically what it was for, is that was supposed to be Justin's I don't know, what do you want to say? Certification,
initiation,
training,
or
initiation, whatever you want to call it. Where I gave him the ominous, you're good to go, and you can go and train everybody and take over the physical world. Is what it was. So I was making him. I was letting him make all the calls, right? And so I turned to him, what do you want to do? Do you want to bounce, or do you want to stay here? And again, still under the training guys to see which he would do. But I helped. I don't want to say I trained, because I definitely didn't do that, but I helped train Justin on a lot of things. So I know he makes the right decisions because I helped him make a lot of those decisions early in his career. So, but once again, his decision making was impeccable. And he's like, no, we're not doing anything wrong. Got our get out of jail free card. We're here under the order of the customer. So let's just wait and see if law enforcement shows up. And so that's what we did. I mean, and to be honest, it's the right call. There's a lot of people in the industry that would have left. Right. And there's a lot of people in Coalfire that would have left, and that's the wrong choice. You're sort of saying you're telling a different story than you mean to be telling, I imagine. Yeah. Oh yeah.
But now you look like perpetrators who's running.
There's this, and we've actually given talks on this. Is there's a lot of people out there who have this pride welled up of never being caught. And it's if you're never really ever getting caught, you're never really pushing the boundaries, and you're never testing every aspect of the customer that you should be testing. You're letting your pride get in the way of, well, I've never been caught. I've never been. No one's ever got me. It's like, well, you're not testing right if you've never been caught.
Absolutely. Got to identify that threshold. I will add, there's one other thing that went into that decision-making process too. This was kind of midway or almost towards the end of the week-long engagement that we've been working on. And every other facility we were in, no alarms were set off, no response. So this was kind of the first time we're hanging around. We're like, all right, we need to see if law enforcement shows up and actually, responds to the situation at hand.
Yeah, that's something for the report right there, is if an alarm goes off and they're like, oh no, it's probably fine.
Which has happened before. Yep.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like same proximity to the police station. They're just not wired up to dial out.
Right. So, I mean, in an ideal version of this, the authorities would have come and you could have said, we're here doing a red team. We have paperwork, we have contract, whatever. And they'd be like, okay, fine. But there was a sort of a perfect storm of misunderstandings here. And it sounds like some county versus state jurisdiction rivalries and maybe a desire to sort of teach you a lesson. And so how did that lead to a night in jail and punitive bail?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that in another scenario that would have happened, because you're right, except it did happen, and it happened in this scenario. Right. They did show up. They did let us go. They did verify us. Everything was fine until the sheriff showed up. The responding deputies were extraordinarily professional. No one was, as they put John Wayne, nobody did anything they shouldn't have done. Nobody pulled a weapon. Everything was 100% cordial in exactly the way that if we were going to write it up in a training seminar to give to new physical pen testers, is exactly what we would say you should do, and that the police should react. And that's exactly what happened. And it wasn't until in our talk that we gave in Black Hat, we actually show the body cam footage of them letting us go, saying, yeah, you guys are good to go. And somebody said, are we going to wait for the sheriff? And no, their officer said, it was deputy, because it's deputy sheriffs. Another deputy said, no, they're good. We verified them. They're okay. And so they let us go. And it wasn't until the sheriff showed up and he said, no, you hold them. They're going to jail. I don't know what for, but they're going to go to jail for something. And then he walks away and he gets on the phone and he decides what he's, charge he's going to trump up on us. And so and that's when the whole the county versus state came into play, when it was the boss, the sheriff, showed up, and he was the one that was upset. No one else was mad. Everybody else knew we were under contract. So
and then didn't the judge say something like she didn't know what red teaming was, but it sounded bad or whatever, and then they sort of bumped your bail up?
She didn't even say that. That would have been nice.
Okay.
She was, y'all need a different story. You know, did I fall off the turnip truck yesterday type of thing?
Wow.
Like this, you're going to have to come up with a different story because this is ridiculous, guys.
So she was like, oh, red teaming. Right. I get it.
Yeah. She just straight up thought we were criminals.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I don't think she had been given all the details of the night prior. When we went up in front of her, she said, oh, you're breaking into this courthouse. This isn't how the state does it. We don't do this type of work. You guys need to come up with another story. This is just crazy that you think I believe this. So it became very clear. You know, the sheriff, everyone the previous night had verified us, called our point of contacts, knew that we were there on contract. We showed them contracts and documents, everything that we had. So they knew we were verified. And then none of that information seemed to make it to the magistrate.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
when I walked up, my understanding was, or at least what I would think was, that the sheriff would have said something, or the prosecutor would have said something prior, or even during would have said, hey ma'am, you know, this is a situation of state versus county, and these gentlemen are working for a private company and they were hired by the state. However, they shouldn't have been there, or however, we believe X, Y, and Z. That's the way that we thought it was going to go, and it did not go that way. The sheriff knew we were verified, spoke to the people that sent us there, our contacts himself, so he says, and then he just sat there in the gallery with his arms crossed with a smile on his face. A smile, you know, a smug grin, if you will.
Yeah.
And didn't say anything. And even when the judge was saying, this is ridiculous, this doesn't happen, we don't do things this way, completely contrary to everything that the sheriff knew to be true, he still sat there and said absolutely nothing.
Wow. So, you know, obviously stories like this send off, you know, all the alarms in cybersecurity professionals' brains, because, you know, it's not only the worst case scenario of, you know, a legitimate and consensual work project, but, you know, also because of how it looks to the outside world, you know, that we're, you know, just hackers that are breaking in and then retroactively constructing an alibi. So, you know, I've had a bunch of red team people on the show before, and I always like to ask, like, what's the line you cannot cross? Because in the outside world, you know, red teaming looks indistinguishable from actual hacking. And, you know, when people think, well, they're kidnapping the CEO or they're smashing windows or whatever, but, you know, obviously there's a whole lot different to it. But I want to get a sense of how, you know, you mentioned a little bit about how this could have been prevented in more of a macro way, not in this specific situation, but like what information or processes could have been put into place that would ensure that you could still do your work as secretively as possible while still keeping yourself safe from inappropriate intervention from law enforcement?
So I think all the typical processes were in place that have always been sufficient for any encounter in the past. And we had client contacts, we had signed contracts, we had a letter of authorization, the get out of jail free card. And that's been sufficient for every single engagement we've been on, except for this one. And honestly, I don't think there would have been any way to prevent this other than having maybe law officials or law enforcement officials who respect the law and use their authority appropriately. Yeah. It probably could have been prevented if a particular official had been notified. But historically, that almost always reduces the effectiveness of the engagement in the testing. So you'll be working in an environment that's more secure for that week while you're on site than it ever realistically is in the day-to-day. And the point of that testing is to emulate real life threats and in a realistic scenario. So anytime I've ever been on engagement where the client notifies the security team, every door is locked, they're doing patrols that just all 24 hours, that never happens. So it kind of degrades the value of the test.
Yeah, it's like when the restaurant knows the food critic is coming, you know, everyone clean behind the fridge and everything like that. So, do you think there's any kind of before and after moment about the way red teaming just can't be done the same way now? Or is this just an outlying event that, we can learn from and move on to?
I'd say red teaming needs to be done this way. That's why we do these engagements in an offensive nature. Kind of the modern red teaming evolution came from DeMercurio from SEAL Team 6, who invented red teaming. And part of his job was breaking into military bases or planting bombs near Air Force One. And there's no way you're going to identify those kind of weaknesses exist unless you're doing an offensive test in nature. So I think this was a teachable moment, that there's some places across the states that maybe aren't up to speed as some other states may be. And I think this was more of an isolated incident, but it's something to be mindful of, that we're still not there. Maybe some other things have come a long ways. Hackers are still fighting the age-old fight that we always have been, that we have this huge negative bias in the public perception that we're the bad guys, when in reality, most hackers are good.
Yeah. Now, I mean, this sort of speaks to also a need for a baseline level of cybersecurity understanding by law enforcement, but like everyone in government, because you hear
Right.
stories about sort of Congress people who are passing laws about like privacy and security who don't quite know how the internet works and things like that. But
Right.
this sort of speaks to those sort of wide gaps in terms of people who are adjudicating on security issues but don't quite know the sort of ins and outs of that. I mean, do you have any sort of prescriptive suggestions in terms of just a baseline of security knowledge for people who are in charge of laws?
I don't know if there's any hope there, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's to take it down a level from just the political level, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got we'll call them the defensive people, right? So you get your facility management and your the people that are in charge of just the facility in general. They have if you go out and you look at Indeed or something,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at facilities management or a facilities director or something of that nature, the people that are supposed to be responsible for making sure that buildings are secure. They have lots of defensive titles. They have lots of certificates that they're supposed to have, and all these things that all the training. A lot of times you say, hey, we want somebody who's prior law enforcement or who was in government secret service or the FBI, and the reality is none of those people have any idea what the heck they're doing. And I'm sure there's a lot of them out there that are getting mad at me for this, but it's true. That we crush them. We don't win. We don't beat them. We crush them. We walk right by every single thing that they have in place because we know the weaknesses, and so it's vital that this stuff gets tested, because there is no, I don't want to say there isn't defense. There isn't a current defense outside of hiring somebody like us or somebody like us in the industry to actually put your defensive measures in place, because they're using old, archaic, antiquated systems and procedures that have been around for years and years and years that never had to stand up to rigorous testing like this, and that's what's in place. And so a lot of times, especially when you have lobbyists or you have or even when you have politicians, a lot of them are older, and a lot of them fall back to some of these antiquated positions, or think that the best person to secure a building is going to be a Secret Service agent.
Right.
You're right. The best person to secure a building for an individual target going into that building to make sure that they're not attacked is a Secret Service agent.
There you go. Yeah.
The best person to secure a building to make sure that nobody can get in is not a Secret Service agent, because that's not their job. That's not what they do. That's not what they're trained for. But yet we have this archaic knowledge or notion that they're the best ones because they protect an individual asset, not a building. So you got to start there first and then work your way up, because those are the people that the government speaks to. Those are the ones that the politicians rely on to give them knowledge, and they're giving them outdated knowledge that is not accurate.
Yeah. Sort of, I want to pull back a little bit in terms of, general concept of red teaming. It's something I ask a lot of red teamers. Do you think that red teaming is overprescribed? And by that, I mean, there might be a perception that every company or organization of a certain size needs to get red teamed in order to show their security system is impenetrable, but they might not have even really done the work necessary leading up to it, whether it's basic pen tests or simple fixes like improving the key card or the door lock system, and so it almost has kind of like a badge of, well, we're big enough, we got to get a red team, on here. Do you think organizations need to know more about their own system first before hiring red teams to attack them?
We do. And Justin has the perfect solution for that, don't you, Justin?
Trying to, anyways. So I'll say no, I don't think it's overprescribed. Totally understand your point. Absolutely. You need to eat your own dog food, shore up your own bases as much as you can. And you're going to get more value out of a red team or a penetration test at that point. So do your Vuln scans first. And then once you guys have applied your own knowledge and fix what you know how, bring in the experts who can take it to the next level, because nobody knows everything. And that's why you need these types of tests. There are different approaches. So maybe before you have your first red team engagement, where you have absolute professionals coming on board and they have 30 different attack paths that they can breach your facility, do a whitelisted walkthrough. So hire a company like Coalfire to come on site, and we'll walk through with the security team and then walk through every point of ingress and work through all your technology, show them the vulnerabilities, hand them the report in more of a blue team manner rather than the red team manner that we're typically familiar with. So that's one thing we're trying to do, to try to bridge that gap. But overall, I'd say no, underprescribed. More organizations need this.
Okay.
And that's both from outside people coming in and doing these assessments, and then also having their blue teams apply that knowledge and raise that threshold.
Okay. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the reason that we're so vehement about people doing this is the individuals in the companies that we work with are the ones that are kind of hitting their chest. There's two. There's ones that are hitting their chest saying we're invincible, and then there's the other ones that want to affect some sort of change,
right.
And so they want us to show whoever their CEO or whoever the decision maker is how vulnerable they really are.
Interesting.
And those are our favorite ones because they want us to do everything and they give us free reign. The other ones that you can't break in here, we're a bank.
Right.
We work with the people who think they're the best, and we walk right in almost every single time.
Right.
Every single time.
And I have to imagine they might be a little more sore losers and maybe less likely to sort of like take your prescriptions if they, if they feel if their feelings got hurt or something.
Yeah, it's weird. They hire you, but then they don't really want you to do the best job you can possibly do. It makes them look bad. But and again, it goes back into what experience do you have in this? You have this old experience that doesn't work, and they tell you it does, and they tell you if you do X, Y, and Z that it's going to be nearly impossible for anybody to get in, and the reality is not that. So yeah, it's underprescribed because of overconfidence, I would say.
Right. How, especially with the case of the courthouse here, but in general, like how long does a red team operation take? Is it a matter of weeks, months? How long do you think this one would have taken the Iowa courthouse?
So we were given a week, which was some of the reasons why things went the way they did. We had 5 buildings in basically 5 days, which is just kind of insane. If you're doing the job properly, you have your recon, enumeration, all the detailed schedules of all the staffs and entities that are working in that building. So you can get up to a week for a building, which for us at Coalfire would be pretty generous, but that's very common at other organizations. So if you're looking to break into a museum, you may need a month to set up everything, get everything in place, and do the proper reconnaissance. So this was a condensed timeline. I'd say most engagements are about 5 days, and it varies based on the facility and number of buildings.
Okay. The primary focus of the Cyberwork podcast, we like to obviously talk news stories and cool things like that, but we mostly want to sort of impart on behalf of our listeners who are just considering the cybersecurity industry or looking to move up in their jobs or careers, get some ideas for them. So I wanted to ask about working in red teaming and pen testing as a whole. What advice would you give, whether about education or skills training or areas of inquiry or just things to make yourself more knowledgeable that you'd recommend for people who want to get into red teaming right now in 2020?
It's a modern era. I started about 7 years ago, but I did start from scratch. So I think I have a really cool story about coming from nothing and knowing nothing about the industry or even that this industry existed, and then becoming a senior security consultant. So part of that path was just a lot of long nights. I'd be working 10, 12-hour days and then coming home and studying for another 8. And my progression path was learning the foundations first. Absolutely had to lay that foundation with the CompTIA A+, which was a 1,200-page book, read every page of it. And then Network Plus, same deal, 1,500 pages, read every page of it. We're then working towards Security Plus and CEH. So certs definitely have a place. If you don't have any prior experience or knowledge, that's something great that you can take to a potential employer and say, hey, I did pass this. I may have some of the requisite skills for this. So studying on your own, absolutely. And then just shooting your shot. So getting involved in the community. One of the big things that got me in was my hobbyist interest in software-defined radio. So showing different skill sets and different interests across the board, and then networking at the security conferences, and then eventually just sending out all the applications that you could. And when it was time for me to apply at Coalfire, I told them, because I'm new, I didn't have really anything that I could show for myself. I had to be there in person. So I flew out to Colorado and did my interview in person in the office, so I could kind of demonstrate not social engineering, but sociable skills. That's part of the consultant role, along with technical acumen as well. So bring that all together, and then once I finally got the job, I was extremely fortunate to meet the people that I did who raised me. So these were hackers that have been hacking for 20 or 30 years and just really took me when I had no business. I wasn't even reading error output and trying to diagnose the issue. And these guys were walking me through and telling me this is what you need to look at. This is how you learn and grow. Wow. And it's been a transformative process, really has reshaped my mind because of kind of the trial by fire that those guys put me through. And I loved it. So absolutely would recommend the career to anybody. And you can do it even if you start from nowhere. It's just going to take a little bit of time and hard work.
Nice.
I've got
Oh, go ahead.
I've
Sorry.
got, if you don't mind,
Please.
actually got an employee that didn't finish high school,
Okay.
and he later went to get his GED, but traditional high school, it wasn't his thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to call his name out. His name is Marcus, and he's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
He's got the tinkerer's mindset. He's constantly working on things. He's putting together, boards from 1980s, resoldering them, seeing if he can bring them back to life. And as a hiring manager, the one thing that you're looking for is that hobbyist attitude, or jobbyist that we used to say at Coalfire, where you want to bring that home, and you love exploring and fixing and learning new stuff and doing it on your own. And the majority of the people that I've hired that have turned out really, really, really well, that didn't have a lot of experience, are the ones that did exactly what Justin's talking about, is they went home when it wasn't their job and learned it, and not only learned it, but loved doing it. It was exciting. It was fun for them. And they put a lot of extra effort into it. So for new people out there that are looking to get hired by someone like me or somebody else in the job and get started, you're not going to get hired because you can break into a building and you're an excellent physical penetration tester, because there just isn't, unless you're like Red Team Alliance or something that
Right.
has a lot of that job, or a lot of those jobs.
Yeah, there's not a lot of places to practice that otherwise.
You're gonna have to get the base skill set of just being a network application penetration tester. So that's really where you have to start. But man, every time somebody walks through that door and they're excited, and even if it has nothing to do with pen testing, if it's something technical or it's something with computers, and they can show some sort of experience and desire to learn that, and the passion, man, that trumps anything.
Yeah.
Almost every single time. We've had guys walk in the door that were super smart, but just wrong attitude, and they were, hey, 8 through the gate, I'm done after this, I don't want to do anything else, I'm not really interested in it, but I just happen to be good at it. Yeah. I'll take a passionate guy like Marcus, who grows up and ends up becoming a great pen tester any day. Yeah.
That's great. And, that's a thing that we're trying to sort of change in the industry, is this, these sort of HR gatekeepers of, who only want to see people with, college degrees or certain, academic or experience levels. But it's sort of a slow, hard sort of sea change to get lots of people to agree that, you have to look beyond certain letters on a person's resume or whatever, and sort of look to their passion. So yeah, it sounds like you say again that this is, hasn't changed things much necessarily, but do you think there are any suggestions for making tasks like these red teams, safer and more transparent from now on? Has Coalfire changed their process at all based on this incident to sort of, go one layer up in terms of letting everyone know what's happening and preventing these sort of incidents?
So I'd say, just like you're never going to have an environment that's 100% secure, there's an inherent risk that comes with, especially physical red team engagements.
Oh, yeah.
And you're never going to get rid of that. So, I mean, it's good for the testers to be aware. Gary and I both know it's a very real possibility that we could be arrested on the job or potentially shot. I think the chances of that are almost minimal based on our training and how we encounter and approach and work with law enforcement in those scenarios. And experience is absolutely key. But as far as Coalfire and process changing, it's coming up on a year, and we're still working on changing some paperwork and getting some other things moving. But finally, now we have a dedicated task force towards this, and we're trying to get community involvement to either get some laws on the books changed. So I think that's a great way to speak to the politicians, to speak their language. And just like you have a safe harbor law or a good Samaritan law, we need something similar for red teamers. And while it may not prevent an arrest, like in a situation like this, it may give us more recourse down the road to have charges immediately dropped, or just walk away from things cleanly without it dragging out for 6 months like it did. So work is being done. I know Chloe Mastagi does a lot of work in this arena too. So we're trying to partner up with some key thought leaders around the industry and make positive change, both internally and at the legal, state, and federal level.
So I noted in some of the articles reported on, that reported the story that Coalfire CEO Tom McAndrew was praised for not hanging you guys out to dry or distancing himself from you in the controversy, which implies to me that other companies might not have been so understanding and might have hung you out to dry. So would that be a common response? If you're going to go to work as a red teamer, are there things in your contract that you need to be watching out for? Sort of you're on your own clause in there or something like that?
Well, the unfortunate thing about contracts is it doesn't really matter what's in the contract.
Right.
It come to that crossroads, and if you're a CEO with less of a spine than Tom is, and legal says leave them in there like ours did, the next CEO might just say okay, because and legally, that this is a terrible thing to say, but legally it's not necessarily the wrong thing to do, right?
Right.
You don't know what your pen testers did. You don't know if they actually did something wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
So leave them in there until we find out what they did wrong, because we don't want to hitch our cart to that horse just in case it's the wrong horse type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately for us, Tom's known us for a very long time, and we are pretty good at what we do. And so Tom was hedging his bets that we didn't do anything wrong, that he's seen enough of us. He's seen enough of our work to know that we don't do things that would involve us getting arrested when we're on the job. So that was good on him for having the wherewithal to say, find me an attorney who says bail them out, and then walked away, which was favorite part of my story, or favorite part of this entire story, is when Tom said that to the executives.
Yeah. Definitely.
It's a great tabletop exercise for employees to run through with their employer. Well, hey, what's going to happen if anything like this did happen? Or if I'm out of scope because a client gave me a wrong IP and I have authorities knocking on my door, what is the company going to do for me in this situation? So absolutely review your contracts, tabletop exercises with your employer. And then Dave Kennedy's Trusted Sec open sourced a lot of their documents, especially pertaining to physical penetration testing. So I'd review those and see kind of what protections they have in place, and then see if you can get your legal team to adopt some of those as well.
Nice.
Yeah, and really what it's going to do, it's going to protect you after the fact. So even if they decide to leave you in jail, the recourse you're going to have later is a civil suit against your company for not doing what they said that they were going to do in the contract. But as far as making sure that they're going to bail you out, hey, that's the one thing you want to make sure you're working for the right company and the right people.
Okay. So I want to sort of jump sideways a little bit. Then, if you don't have an opinion on this is fine. But there's something else that I read in the news that sort of speaks to a greater issue between the courthouse and this other story. But the company Talkspace, there was a security researcher named John Jackson who found an apparent bug in the company's sign-up function that allowed him to get a free membership without vetting whether or not he qualified. It's an insurance thing for a psychiatry website. The bug discovery was rejected by Talkspace as not real, and then sent him a legal threat for pointing it out. So I'm wondering if things like bug bounty programs and aggressive pen testing methods are often finding these issues that companies don't like to think about. Is there anything to be done to help organizations like this accept responsibility, or are these just always going to be, there's just going to be people who don't get it?
It's a very real issue that hackers have been fighting since the dawn of hacking, right? For decades, this has been going on. I would really here point to disclose.io and a lot of Chloe Mistaghi's work. She's working on an initiative to have companies adopt these type of programs where they set bug bounties and how to mature those companies. So she has all sorts of stats. I think it's like 60% of vulnerabilities that hackers identify in a bug bounty type situation don't report it because maybe they were slightly out of scope, or the company wasn't receptive, or didn't have a bug bounty program whatsoever. Right. And she's a great person to work with and work through to accomplish that change, whether it's at that company in particular or to try to disclose vulnerabilities in a responsible manner.
Yeah, and part of the issues with bug bounties that at least I'm personally seeing recently is that companies are doing the bait and switch. They say, oh yeah, if you find anything, it's good to go, just let us know. And then you come by and you're like, hey, check this out. And they're like, nah, that doesn't count. Yeah, and they're doing that a lot lately. A lot. Oh, that doesn't count. Oh, that
don't look over there.
That doesn't count. Yeah. And then they take this information and they will typically go back and they'll fix it, but they won't reward the pen tester that turned around and found it. So there is a huge swath of the population as far as bug bounty hunters, if you will, that aren't doing it anymore. They're just like, no, because every time I turn in a bug, every time I show something, they say it doesn't count. You're like, it's specifically right here in your rule set that says this is what you're looking for. You're looking for cross-site scripting. I found cross-site scripting. Oh yes, but that's reflective. It's still cross-site scripting. What are you doing? And then they don't pay them. So there's a lot of people, and it's dangerous to do that. They think they're going to get free stuff, and I guess they think that hackers are dumb, and it's the exact opposite. But lots of companies have been doing that lately, and it's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, it makes you look bad. Yep. So I want to talk. We're sort of wrapping up here a little bit, but in terms of hiring people, as red teamers or part of your team and stuff, can you sort of speak about some of the ethical and social issues that cybersecurity pros looking to get into red teaming need to keep in mind? Because I think this can be a very sort of exciting and glamorous sounding thing, and you do have that sort of like, once we're in, we're on our own, and and we got to take care, whatever. But I've talked to enough red team leaders to know that none of them are terribly fond of loose cannons on their team either. So what are some things that like potential newcomers need to know so that they don't go to sort of wild style on these sort of operations?
You're there to do a job, and just like the people that you're testing, you're supposed to have rules, and you're supposed to have some sort of SOP that you abide by. And as a social engineer, the people that you want to go after are the ones that are going to bend or break the rules. Well, this is our policy, and then we've got them. As soon as they break from policy, then you've got them. And as especially as a physical pen tester, you've got to stay within the policy that you've got set forth through the rules of engagement, through the customer, through your company. You can't break those at all. The other part of that is you have to be able to be a sociopath with an on-off switch, is the simplest way that I can put it.
Yeah.
And you walk, like, literally it is our job to walk up to somebody and manipulate them like there is no tomorrow. And you have to do it with an absolute clear conscience. You can't feel bad about it. And you've got to take advantage of that person's something that is innately great and wonderful about that person, and twist it and use it as a weapon against them to destroy whatever it is that they've got in front of them in order to get the goods, right? But you've got to be able to turn that off too. And there is, if anything else, that's the thing that you do not want on your team, is the guy that can't turn it off, or girl that can't turn it off. That's a huge thing, because people will use their superpowers later when they shouldn't be using them, and you don't want those people on your team either. You've got to be able to turn it on and off, and you've got to be able to do it and look somebody in the eye and straight up lie to them, and then turn around and shut it off and go back to them and say, I'm sorry, like this, I promise you this is for your own good, and this is why, and be able to sit down and have the conversation, but you got to stay within the rules of engagement. But I know Justin has something else.
Yeah.
I just say, it's up to red team leads to kind of identify the personal dynamics of their team, and then for newcomers to just listen and be aware that it's not Ocean's 11 and you can't do active shooter threats or pull the fire alarm. I mean, rules of engagement, sometimes there's a time and a place for it, but typically not. And destructive entry, things like that. So it's really about the team lead knowing the team dynamics and getting a good feel for that candidate before he's brought out in a live exercise, which is another great reason, to the point we were making earlier, going on in a blue team manner, and assessing things in that way. Then you can have somebody on site and see kind of how they interact with customers and what their thought process is. So there should be a thorough vetting process to it, but at the same time, you don't want to limit it so much that we're not doing this type of work, because just like bug bounties, it's a really big issue that, on a global scale, the United States is falling so far behind because we can't do this type of work, our too much red tape, and our hands are bound, that we're proactively losing the state of security in our country.
Okay, can you talk about that a little bit? What are some of the red tape issues that are a problem right now?
Well, I mean, just going back to bug bounties, if people, 60% of them aren't disclosing vulnerabilities, maybe they're taking that and selling that to other government agencies or other malicious entities that may use that for a nefarious act, instead of getting with the company and telling them, hey, here's your issue and this is how you can fix it. And if that company comes back and says, one, it doesn't exist, but two, we're going to sue you for showing that this existed, but we're denying it. Nobody wins in that situation. So a lot of reform needs to take place, and we're still, again, fighting that fight that's been going on for decades.
Yeah, and we've got the example from Iowa, right? If we want to pull from something, you've got a bunch of legislation that was passed from people who have no idea about pen testing or even red teaming for that matter, and then they go out and they hire a third party, which was a law firm, to give them advice on it. So you've got people that have no experience hiring somebody with less experience than they have, giving them advice on what they should do about something that no one has any experience on. Yep, that's how they're passing laws.
From a legal point of view, which is like almost the exact opposite of a red team. Like, you need to be able to bend the rules to find these vulnerabilities. I mean, you're not going to find out that you can plant 500 pounds of explosives near Air Force One if you're trying to approach that in a legal standpoint, right? So that's realigning those perceptions.
Well, this was a blast, and I want to wrap up a little bit and send you guys on your way. But what are your current plans and activities? Do you have any projects that you can talk about at the moment?
So we're full scope testers. A lot of our work is virtual, and especially right now, quarantine, everything else going on, we're not really on site.
Yes.
Hopefully do have some fun engagements coming up where we can do those whitelisted walkthrough physical assessments on school districts, which would be a great time to assess like 5 different schools. But yeah, it's business as normal. The majority of our job is virtual testing. My job anyways. Gary's in a little bit different role being a manager. Okay. But yeah, kind of business as usual, just on the virtual front.
Yeah, we're starting to make more of a push in kind of the what essential worker section, right? So things like the banks and areas like that, financial, where they're going to be open and you've got employees there is doing those whitelisted walkthroughs and trying to teach some of those essential workers some anti-social engineering techniques. The unfortunate truth when you have a situation kind of like we have with the ongoing pandemic is there's a lot of people that are out of work, which means there's a lot of people that haven't had money in a long time, and then that translates to a lot of people that are desperate, and that's a lot of what we do is mimicking desperate people, and do never confuse desperate with unintelligent. You get some person who hasn't had money for or hasn't had a job for 4 or 5 months. They've got a family and they're trying to feed them, and you'd be amazed at what they can find on YouTube. You can pretty much find your way through YouTube in and of itself, especially just with some of the stuff that and this isn't a knock on Deviant whatsoever, or even Drew Porter. The some of the things that they have out there and the stuff that they say is brilliant stuff. But if a semi-intelligent person watches that and practices it at home because they're desperate enough to try to do something dumb because they don't have any other choice, there's a lot of damage that they can do. So that's kind of the mindset that we're taking right now is to teach people the techniques that somebody like that might be able to do or accomplish, and showing them, number one, how it starts up, what to look for, and how to defend against it.
So one last question here. If people want to know more about either of you or about Coalfire, where can they go online?
I think Gary and I are both pretty active on Twitter or LinkedIn. Yeah. Gary is Ancient, AIN Chance. Red Team Wins, coalfire.com. And then if you want to get involved with the Protecting Ethical Hacker Initiative, I think that's coalfire.com/protecting ethical attack hackers. And that's how you can get signed up with that petition and then get involved in that work group.
Okay. Could you talk about the petition a little bit?
Yeah, so that came after our Black Hat talk. It's something that we're launching again to try to get those safe harbor or Good Samaritan laws on the books. So we're really formulating how we want to approach that. And right now it's looking like we want to approach individual states at the state level to try to enact those types of changes. Federal level, it can take 3 to 5 years to get the laws that we're looking to have passed actually enacted. So it's open to everybody. If anybody has insight or you're just curious and want to hear kind of where things are shaping up, that's the place to be.
That's great. All right. Well, Gary, Justin, thank you so much today for joining me and sharing your thoughts and insights.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Chris.
Do you mind if I give a shout out real quick to our VP, Mike Weber? We've been doing these talks and we've been talking a lot about stuff. And the thing that I don't want to necessarily forgot, but we did not mention was our VP of labs, Mike Weber, at the time, right after we got arrested. He was an amazing advocate for us within Coalfire itself. He was moving mountains and he was yelling at people and he was trying to get stuff done for us internally. And unfortunately that part has never come up, what internally was happening at Coalfire after the arrest. So we've never really had a chance to bring up his name, but yeah, he was amazing and he fought for us and it was great. And unfortunately we've never been able to say thank you, outwardly, so people knew what an amazing VP that Mike Weber was. But yes, thanks, Chris. I appreciate being able to say thanks for that.
Great, yeah. Shout out to Mike. That's awesome. And thank you both for your time, and thank you all for listening and watching today. If you enjoyed today's video, you can find many more on our YouTube page. Just go to youtube.com and type in Cyberwork with Infosec to check out our collection of tutorials, interviews, and past webinars. you'd rather have us in your ears during your workday, all of our videos are also available as audio podcasts. Just search Cyber Work with Infosec in your podcast catcher of choice. And if you are on one of the big ones, iTunes, Stitcher, etc., a rating and review would be very appreciated. As mentioned in a video at the top of the show, we want to hear from you about what you want to see more of on the show. So please go to www.2, that's www and the numeral 2.infosecinstitute.com/survey, and you'll find a short set of questions about your listening habits and interests. If you take the survey, you'll be eligible to win a $100 Amazon gift card. That's www.infosecinstitute.com/survey. Thank you once again to Gary DeMercurio and Justin Wynn, and thank you all again for watching and listening. We will speak to you next week.